welcome to another thrilling episode of I Might Need This Later, a gamers podcast. My name is Joe, and with me, as always, are my boys. One of them, the all time leader in Fortnite second place finishes, the other, Mr. Victory Royale himself. It's Jesse
Yeah.
McConnor. Say hello, guys.
Oh,
Nailed it. It's
I
that you
think.
you could have taken it from me, but you gave up on Fortnite.
Well, the fact of the matter is, the fact that I've gotten second places, I'm gonna take that because, to be honest with you,
It
I'm
doesn't count.
pretty sure I lead in dying before
Oh,
anybody else.
before the first zone comes in? Yeah, that's for sure. I've seen
Like, no, like landing, not getting a gun and dying.
it. Yeah. Let's go.
Pickaxe battles lost.
Where's the place that we would always land in? Was it Haunted Hills, and we would just never get a gun
No,
and
no,
die?
no, no, no. It was the farm.
Oh yeah. We would go. Oh yeah, that's right, because you got to go to the Long Barn.
You gotta go to the Long Barn.
Gotta go to
Yeah.
Long Barn.
Yeah,
The
always
Red
go to
Barn.
the Long Barn.
And if somebody lands there, you don't go for a gun. You just go to ask them a question.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you gotta
But
do.
anyway, guys, we have an awesome episode lined up for everyone today. I mean, I can't believe we're already on episode 5, but today we're going to talk to you about our favorite games that we feel have flown under the radar and just haven't been met with mainstream success or talked about a lot. But before we get into that, we're going to jump into our question of the week. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Jess.
All right, so the question that I have posed for you guys this week and myself is, who's a video game character that you had a crush on? We all know we did. We can admit to it.
Oof. You ain't wrong. You
Let's just
ain't
get it
wrong.
out in
Yeah,
the open.
I mean, you're not wrong.
You ain't wrong.
All right, I'll go first if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for
Go
it.
for it.
All right. So one of the first games that I remember playing in the PlayStation era was, of course, Resident Evil. We've talked about it a lot before, and I don't really like games that are intent on scaring you or even vaguely scary. But I did put a lot of hours into the director's cut of the original Resident Evil, and I always played as Jill. Um, just from a practical standpoint, she was a better character. Like she could hold two more items. She had a lockpick. But aside from that, there was just something about her gritty attitude and her resiliency in the face of all the undead masses descending upon her that just made her incredibly attractive to me. And I mean, plus she's pretty easy on the eyes as much as a blocky PlayStation
Oh,
could be.
blocky.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go with Jill Valentine.
I like Jill because she's a female, but you felt like they didn't. She's just a badass. She's not a damsel in distress. She's like, what's the thing from Hercules? I'm a damsel, but I'm not in distress.
Yeah.
Is that yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I feel about her. She's like, wait, they need help. I'll take care of that. That's how I felt about Jill.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
There you go.
if she can make it into stars on her own merits, she's got to be somewhat strong.
Very
And then
true.
to be able to live through the undead apocalypse, she's got to be doubly strong. So I'm gonna go with that.
Joe just didn't want to admit that he had a huge crush on Chris and his sweet muscles.
I mean, he does have sweet muscles,
He has
and
the
he runs
best
super
muscle.
fast.
So fast with swiftness. Mine is my main when I played Overwatch. Overwatch was my jam. It would have to be my girl, Dr. Ziegler, Mercy. She, she's so hot, and she just is out there helping people. And she was just out there helping people constantly, and she just was such a little sweetheart out on the bat. Like people are shooting at, and she's just like, "Oh, heroes never die." Just Mercy as a whole, just being a blonde and being fantastic at healing, being so uplifting, just rezzing, just always being there for her team. What's not to love?
I mean, I can definitely get on board with Mercy. When I was playing Overwatch, she was definitely my main, and her play of the game highlight where she just kind of kneels down and is reaching her hand out to you to lift you up. Ah, love it. It's great.
It's literally amazing.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go standard me, I suppose. And I'm gonna go with Renoa. I think
from
that's
Final Fantasy VIII.
from Final Fantasy VIII.
It's like
I think that's one of the reasons why I loved Final Fantasy VIII so much. I can't help it. I'm a romantic, and Final Fantasy VIII at its core it's a love story. That's kind of it. There's obviously many different parts to it, but at its core, it's a love story, and Renoa is beautiful for what a PlayStation game could create, I suppose. But it's also the essence of her character, who she was, what she stood for. It's the same thing in regards to Jill. It's it's beyond just it's who she was as a person, who she was through the story. It's what you had to do for her, and et cetera, et cetera. That was one of those. And to put a cap on this question, it's funny because Joe and I run a video game show at conventions and stuff. And we did actually, sorry, this was for Family Feud, a video game edition of Family Feud that we ran. And this question was posed to a studio audience of people playing Family Feud. And the two people that were up there, neither one of them could come up with an answer in some short amount of time. And me and Joe were both very confused.
I think they were just embarrassed to answer because, if you have a little bit of social anxiety and you're up in front of, a room of 200 people and you have to tell people who your video game crush might have been, you might be a little hesitant to do that.
Come on, we could all just say Lara Croft and move on.
Yeah, I mean, she was the number one answer, obviously.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Nintendo 64 Lara Croft.
Oh, yeah. Big blocks.
Big blocks.
Well, thank you, Jesse, for this week's question. So before we get into our draft question this week, I want to remind all the listeners that, again, we are up and running on social media and YouTube. To find us on Facebook and Instagram, you just have to search I Might Need This Later AGP on Facebook and Instagram. Our Twitter handle is IMNTL _podcast. And also you can reach out to us through email at I Might Need This Later AGP @gmail.com. Feel free to contact us on any of those. Give us feedback, comments, if you want to share what your answers for our questions are. And lastly, our YouTube channel is finally coming along pretty nicely. Jesse's put up 4 different videos from our Pokemon Crystal Randomizer Cinco Bingo runs, and I've started my own series doing a Let's Play / walkthrough of the Insane Difficulty mod for Final Fantasy Tactics. You can find both of those, along with clips from this show, on the YouTube channel, which is the same as the podcast name. I Might Need This Later, a Gamer's Podcast. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that, Jess?
Yeah, and as well, to help us out, we would really appreciate it if you go on to iTunes or Spotify, rate us 5 stars, put a comment, tell us how awesome that me and Connor are and how terrible Joe is. We would really appreciate that.
Yeah, you just roast me as best you can, guys. Like,
there you go.
Let us know which side you're on.
Yeah, are you on Team Joe?
Team Joe or Team Jesse?
Yeah, why do we gotta put us like that? Why is it gotta be like that?
Or Team Joe and Jesse versus Team Connor.
Whoa.
Ooh,
whoa. I retract my pinning. I'm sorry.
I think that's Team Fortnite versus Team Never Fortnite.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so you guys ready?
Oh yeah.
I'm ready.
For this week's draft question, we're going to discuss our favorite games that we feel have flown under the radar, haven't gotten that mainstream attention that we wanted, and we're just baffled as to why. So the way that this is going to work is that we're going to take turns discussing a game that we like in serpentine fashion until we've each picked 4 games. And this week's order, as determined randomly by my wife picking names from a hat, goes as follows. Connor's going to have the first pick. I'll have number 2 since I am number 2. And last and most definitely least is Jesse. So Connor, start us off, brother.
Boom. All right. So I feel pretty confident that no one's gonna steal my answers first off. So that's always good. That's a good feeling. For my first pick, have you guys ever heard of the game? It's on PC. I don't know if it's on other console or whatever, but Vampire or Vampire, VAMY.
PYR.
Yeah, PYR.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've
never played it.
It is so sick. So it takes place, you're in London, like during like the First World War, like when like diseases are running rampant and you're a vampire doctor. And so you are like trying to help people, but at the same time trying to stay alive as a vampire. And the more like the more that you like drain people's hell, like you have to drain their hell, like their life, in order to gain abilities, but you can choose to not do that because there's consequences for your actions. So each character in the game can offer you side quests, they can offer you things throughout the duration of the game at some point, but if you decide to kill them and use them as like upgrades, then you'll never be able to unlock that quest again. So it's kind of like a perma decision without even knowing it kind of game. Like I didn't know that the first time I went into it.
So is it kind of like an RPG in a way?
Yeah, it is. It's all single player. Like it's there's no online or anything. So it's literally you play as a vampire doctor. Like it's 100% RPG. And so you can like, and you help out the citizen, and like, so you can decide to be good or bad. And depending on how you can help the citizens, you cannot help them. The more that you help them, the more how I don't know how to word, the more like worth they get later when you do decide to harvest them, like suck their blood kind of thing. And so it kind of benefits you to, it puts you in the decision of, well, I need to upgrade my stuff now versus I can make the game a little bit more challenging for the short term, if that makes sense. And the combat was really cool. You got like abilities where you could like like kind of move in as a shadow, and it was really, you had swords and like shields. It was super cool. I really liked it.
Awesome. I will definitely have to check that game out because any game where you can just run around being a vampire, eating
Yeah,
people, that sounds cool to me.
it's super cool.
All right, so for my first pick, I'm gonna have to go with one that I think is gonna be in Jesse's list too, and I don't want him taking it from me. So I'm gonna go with Uncharted Waters: New Horizons. Yeah,
Yeah, of
you
course
could
it was
already
on
hear
my
it.
list.
Huh?
Of course it was on my list. It
Yeah,
was
of
going to
course.
be the first pick.
Well, the reason that I put this on, so first off, the game has been released and re-released several times over the years, but what I remember it from is like it's during its run on the Sega Genesis or SNES, what in that era. Um, like this game was way ahead of its time in terms of parallel storytelling, the ability to hire from nearly like 100 unique crewmates with different skills and abilities, and it used like a unique card-based system when you were doing captain's duels when you're fighting on the open seas. So when you put all of that together, it just made for this like amazing combination. Like there's so many different things that you could do or be in the game. You could be a famous trader of goods. You could be a pirate. You could be a cartographer, explorer. You could pretty much make the game what you want it to be. And each character that you could pick from, there were 6 or 8 characters. I can't remember exactly.
I think it was 6.
I think it was 6, yeah. Each had their own distinct storyline, but the storylines overlapped with other characters. So you got to see like it was really fun to see each of those specific interactions. And then beyond that, like each port city in the game could be invested in with money and upgraded to offer different goods or ships. It was like really the first like open world game I'd ever played, and it was just something like mad to me. Like I had never seen anything like that, and I never hear anyone talk about it other than Jeff. And I've never seen it on any list anywhere, and it's a travesty. Honestly, it's a travesty.
It really is. That obviously that was going to be my first pick, but it's just there's so much you could do in that game. That was the first semi-open world game that I've ever played as well, and it's just such a good game. The game it was on Super Nintendo and Genesis actually. I own it on Genesis,
You
but
had
it's
it
on
on,
both.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I remember, and I'm sure you remember, when you get it on, like an emulator or something, it gets a little easier because you can save because there's like a blackjack system where you could try to win money and double or nothing through everything. So you're just like, save state, hit me, over, load state.
Yeah, but not even that. Like you could just use in that same regard with the save state, you can just go looking for the explorations around the world. And if you know where each of them are, go get the 100K ones every time and make sure that they're there. Like it was a really cool game. Like you could almost anywhere in the world that you can go, and each region of the world had its own specific goods. So like you go into like East Asia and they have like spices and tea and silk and things like that, and then you come back into Europe and they're working with all the gold and the silver, and like it was just a really cool game that like you can tell that the designers like took a lot of time with making it like realistic in the sense that the world was what the world looked like back then.
To tie a bow on it, then get to mine. But everything was customizable in all of the ships. You can get different kinds of ships, figureheads, guns, the crew. You hire the crew. You get specific captains to train. It was that insane for a Super Nintendo / Genesis game.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna go with my first pick. One of my favorite games of all time. I have to pick it. I'm gonna go with Earthbound because in light of last week. I don't think Connor's gonna pick it, but
I wouldn't have picked it.
No, and when we were talking about this question, it's one of those like flew under the radar. Like people vaguely know what Earthbound is now because of Super Smash Brothers. People vaguely know what it is, because of the items in Super Smash Brothers, but not that many people have actually played Earthbound. Plus, it actually, when it came out, didn't sell very well.
Which
It's
is,
funny.
it's
Go
like what
ahead.
you said like last week, or at least like the conversation we had last week. Like I didn't even know that there was a whole game based upon. I only knew Ness, that whole the bat, all of that from Super Smash.
Yeah.
So that really flew under the radar.
So, Earthbound, a quick funny story about it. I actually, many, many moons ago, my mom worked for Blockbuster. It still exists somewhere, I think.
Yeah, there's one in Oregon, I think.
I think Alaska, there's one. But way back in the day, they used to rent video games and like Super Nintendo games. That's how old this was. And my mom would work there, and when you worked there, you got 5 free rentals a week. It was actually insane, like insane, because hence why I
Dang.
went and worked for Blockbuster after. Yeah, it was insane. And so we went. She was working there, and she brought me in. She's like, "Why don't you pick a game?" And I was like, "Sure." So I saw Earthbound. Now Earthbound's box was enormous, enormous. I was like not like a regular size Super Nintendo box. It was enormous because it had literally like the walkthrough booklet came with it. It was crazy. And I picked it and I was like, "Oh, this game looks awesome." And my mom was like, "That game's probably too hard for you." Because I was young and I was like, "Nah, it's fine. I'll figure it out." Rented that game. I don't think I slept for days. Me and my brother played that game endlessly for days. It was just so good. Earthbound is obviously one of my favorites, and I'm sure one of Joe's favorites. It was way ahead of its time. It was one of those games, though. I think the reason it didn't sell so well is because it's very, it's very cartoony and kind of silly. Anybody that's seen pictures of it, you go look at a picture of it. It's very silly looking. The whole idea of it's very silly. You're fighting against like old bag ladies and hippies sometimes, and
Yeah, the angry taxi cab or
angry taxi. Yeah, so some monsters are just ridiculous. The whole premise of the game is ridiculous, but that was the point of it. But it was just the game was way ahead of its time in so many different ways, and I think it's a game that not many people have played. And if you haven't played it, sit down, take the time. You won't regret it. I promise.
yeah, it's one of those games that doesn't take itself too seriously, and it just has such lovable and likable characters that it's a must play game, and over the years it has formed a bit of like a cult following, but definitely did not have the mainstream success that it should have had.
Yeah, and for instance, it's not that many were made, so it's so expensive now. Like if you find a copy of it, like even in a copy in box is probably like $600 to $800, and just that strategy booklet alone is probably $150 in bad shape.
Yep.
So my second pick, I have a lot on my list. Oh boy! All right, I'm gonna go with Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, I love that game.
So it was on Conker's Bad Fur Day was on N64. Hey, did you know, Joe? By the way, there was because I know that Connor probably hasn't played any Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Nope.
No. Did you know there was a story mode to this game?
Oh, I thought it
was just multiplayer.
Yeah, I thought it was just multiplayer where we just shoot each other.
Yeah. So Conker's Bad Fur Day was a shooter, but it was very cartoony. But I mean, it was just so limited in its availability. I think it was like a Blockbuster exclusive or something so random like that. And it was an N64 game so it's a Nintendo game that was geared to adults because it was like a drunk squirrel. Was he a squirrel?
I think it was a squirrel or a chipmunk or something like that.
He's a drunk squirrel. So the game is like was made for adults, and then it was also like towards the tail end of the N64, like before the N64 was kind of phased out. So that's kind of why the game didn't sell so well. But there were so many good memories we have in the game. We played that game endlessly. It was one of those split screen shooters, very boxy, but fantastically ridiculous. It was in the same vein as like I'm sure some people remember like Army Men, Sarge's Heroes.
Yeah,
Like
or the
it was
South
in the
Park game that was
or
the
the
shooter.
yeah, or the South Park game that was a shooter. Yeah, so it was in that same vein, but it was just different. Like so different than any stupid game we've ever played. The game was awesome.
Yeah, it was another game that just again didn't take itself too seriously, and it did cater toward a more adult audience because it was just this drunk squirrel running around talking about gambling and doing other questionable activities that you definitely didn't want your kid anywhere near.
No.
All right, my second pick. I'm gonna go with a more recent game. So this game, it's called Crosscode. It's an action RPG that was released like towards the end of 2018. So it has like all the feel of a traditional like SNES RPG, but with the flow and mechanics of a modern game. So the story follows the main character whose name is Leah, and she's an avatar in an MMO called Crossworld. So the game's like super meta because you're playing a game inside of a game, like
Oh,
very meta.
Gameception.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very gameception. So the story and the writing does leave a little bit to be desired because there's a few pretty cringy spots, but the game is just so dang likable. The combat system is very fast paced, very user friendly at the surface, and like incredibly complex the more you dive into the combinations between the elements and all the combinations that your character can do. The platforming is like probably the crispest and the cleanest I've ever seen in any game, and the controls are like very, very responsive. And then you have like this whole skill tree to customize your character. It gives you a lot of different options and also leaves room for you to kind of like change your mind as you're going. So there's a lot of customization for your character. Like I finished that game playing it for like 10 days straight because I couldn't put it down. And then since I've finished it, the developers are already adding new side missions and new additions to the main story like all the time. So like it's something that I'm definitely going to go back to.
I
Nice.
like it. I like it. So for mine, for my next pick, um, I'm gonna go with kind of a game that honestly kind of got a lot of hate. Like it, I don't know if y'all have played. It's called No Man's Sky.
Yes.
Yeah, I
You know,
refunded it instantly.
you
There
didn't
you go.
see, everybody hated that game. I loved it. I thought that game got so much hate, and for like what you could do in that game, you could do, you could just explore, and it was so fantastic and immersive, and you could like build different bases, and I loved everything about it, and I didn't understand why a lot of people hated on it.
So here's my opinion on why I disliked that game. So when it was being hyped and being released, there was all these promises of like immersive multiplayer and being able to play with your friends and like all this like um
Mm,
all these like I can't remember what the term is, but like the like randomly generated worlds constantly popping up and like it just constantly generating and like immersive this and that. I saw the same style of monster over and over and over again, like on 5 different planets. And
yeah,
I was trying to play with a buddy of mine, and we could not meet up with each other in the game, no matter how hard we tried. Like anytime that we would like choose the options to like play near each other, we're like 200 systems apart.
and you're like, what the
And
heck?
it
That
just
makes
got to be
sense.
so frustrating that they didn't deliver on what was promised that I couldn't play it anymore.
That's
But
true. Because I just played it as like a single player game. And so I was just like, yo, I'm just going to go explore around and see what's going on and just what's on this planet, what's on this moon. I'm going to set up a base here and see what kind of, and once I kind of learned the inner workings of like, oh, I have to farm these certain materials, kind of like a Minecraft kind of game where you have to craft at least that's kind of I pictured it as like a Minecraft how you could dig and like find stuff. I loved it. And I feel like yeah, it just went under the radar for me for how much, like, what, because it might have under delivered, but what was there to me was remarkable.
I feel like Joe and I had so many hours in Space Engineers,
yeah,
and
that's
that
a
really
similar
kind
game.
of it's a similar game, but I feel like that game was very clean.
I mean, there's definitely some physics issues in that game, but just to go back to No Man's Sky for a second. So, good news for you, Connor. Like, if you ever want to pick that game back up again, like there have been a lot of free updates and free bug patches and free everything that have come out since that release. That it's probably a much better game than it was at release, but it just left such a bad taste in my mouth. I don't think I'll ever go back to it.
Yeah, makes sense. I picked up a lot of games like that where you're just like, not my cup of tea.
All right. What's next, Connor?
So my next pick is gonna be okay. This one, I've talked about horror games before. I'm a horror fanatic. But this one I feel like kind of went under the radar because it was an exclusive, and so I don't feel like a lot of the population got exposed to it. But Until Dawn, on PlayStation, it was PlayStation 4, I believe. PS4. But it was a stereotypical like horror-based game. So you were there was like 8 teenagers that were going up to this mountain, and you kind of got to play each role of them. Like they each had their own little segments that you would play through, and your goal was to get them to survive. And if you made a mistake and one of them died, then there was no turning back. Like they were gone. Um, and it was cool because it really, like, obviously I'm a horror fan. Not only do I like horror games, I love horror movies. And so it was cool that they had like I said, the stereotypical, they had the jock, the blonde, the hero, like a nerd. They had like all your stereotypical like people that you would find in a horror movie, and you just had to try to survive through the night from like a murderous killer. And then at the end, it's you find out that there's like Wendigos, which is like an Indian spirit that
Mhm.
like will kill you. Like so, it's super cool. Like so all the plot twists. It was a really really good game.
I'll be honest, I've never even heard of it.
Same.
Yeah, like it's such a well written horror game, and it looks really clean. Like it's super super good. If you like horror, and it's not like jumpy, like there are some jump scares I guess, but it's mostly just like, yo, there's this killer on the loose, I'm gonna try. And it would be like decision based, like, oh, you can walk around a little bit but then be like, oh, you're running, do you run left or do you run right?
Oh, so
I
it's kind of like a Telltale game almost.
Yeah, exactly, where you're like, oh well, I'm gonna run right, I get like split second decisions, and then you just have to play it out. And like if you and some of those decisions lead to you dying, and if you're dead, then the storyline continues without you, and you just kind of move on to the next character.
Oh, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's actually really really fun. I really really enjoyed it.
Well, awesome. All right. So, oh, did you have more that you wanted to add? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's it. That's it.
Okay. So for my third pick, I'm gonna go back in time a little bit. We're gonna go to the original NES games. And I'm gonna go with one of my favorite sports games that I've ever played called Baseball Stars.
Nice.
Yeah. That game, and to this day I will say it was the most advanced NES game that I've ever played, way ahead of its time. So just try to digest this for you, okay? You're able to create your own teams from scratch. You're able to name all of the players. You can hire new players, fire players that are underperforming, and you can upgrade your players by beating other teams and earning money. Like on an NES game.
Yeah, that game was so good.
That's super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, my buddy Tom and we would play this for days and days, weeks and weeks, and hours, whatever it was. So we both made our own teams, and we would create a season and just play as much as we could to increase the stats of our players. And then when one of us felt satisfied with our respective power levels, we would give the other the cartridge to take home, and then they would do the same till we got till relatively the same like power level. And then we would spend an entire weekend just playing against each other for hours. Like literally some of my best gaming memories were right there. Like I'm not going to get into details on what our team names were or where any of the players were named, because just think about what 13 or 14-year-old boys name things when they're able to do what they want.
When they have the freedom of choice.
Yeah. So so that's
Work
that's definitely my third pick, like
and
baseball.
chores.
Yeah. All right, Jess, you're up.
Okay. So I'm always gonna go back in time, and then I'm gonna try to pick a newer one. It's kind of hard when you think about this question. Games these days, like they just get between Steam and advertising and YouTube and blah blah blah. I feel like it's hard for a newer game to get under the radar, I suppose. So for my last one, I'll pick one that's a little newer. But for my third pick, I'm going to pick Parasite Eve. I feel like Parasite Eve is a game that some people know, but guarantee most people don't. Parasite Eve was a PlayStation game. It pretty much combined Final Fantasy and Resident Evil. That was the idea behind it. It was a turn-based RPG horror survival game. And I think not only one of those games that was way ahead of its time, I think the storyline was so good, but it was one of those games that a lot of people could like because I think Connor would like it because it is, it is sort of a horror game. I like it because of the RPG elements. Some people like it because of the customization, because it's not like you're hitting things with swords and shields. You're playing a police officer you're shooting and customizing guns and stuff like that. And then the storyline was fantastic, but it was also like, I think it was also one of those games that didn't take it too seriously because it was a little ridiculous. But I think you could play the game today and still enjoy it. I think that's a big thing about Parasite Eve.
I agree with you more there, Jess.
And I'm going to finish up. I'm going to pick a newer game. This is going to come way out of left field, and I'm completely okay with it. I'm going to pick a game called Mad Games Tycoon.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the thing. Sometimes, you'll get a game on Steam. It'll be like, oh, that game's on sale for 19 cents. Let's just buy it. So Mad Games Tycoon was a game. I think I got it through a Humble Bundle, to be honest with you. And it pretty much, I'm going to get a quick synopsis, as you play a dude or a girl who starts creating games in their garage. You're coding games, you're going through the whole process of making a game, and then advertise the game, sell the game, etc. That's the whole game. That's literally it, except obviously you go in a grander scale. As you make money, you can open up your own little shop, and you can open up a bigger thing, go grander scale. And there was Joe went way deep on this game. I went pretty deep, but there was a 2-week period where that was the only game that Joe and I played. And I don't think anybody knows about that game.
No, I've never.
Yeah, so one of the things that you forgot to touch on just with that game is that not only were you making these games, but you were able to pick the genre of the game and then pick what topics were played in the game, and you would have probably a list from, I would say, near more than 100 different topics to pick from. So you could be like, I'm going to make a monster pirate fantasy RPG, or and if you didn't pick the right combinations of things, your game would bomb. So you had to figure out what topics worked together and what topics worked with which particular genres, because you would get bonuses based if you got those right. And so there was a lot of trying to figure out what it was, and then on top of that you had to pick, all right, what's your game going to focus on? The soundtrack, the artwork, the controls, or the graphics? Things like that. And depending on, again, what genre you picked or what topics you picked, you had to adjust those to try and get it right. So
I think me and Joe might be the only two people that have ever played the game, but it's fine.
Yeah. So it's incredibly complex and simplistic at the same time.
Yeah.
All right.
I like it.
For my last pick, this one is not a newer game, but the series is still ongoing. But I'm going to just talk about the first installment of the series. So the game's called The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky. And without a doubt, this is one of the best JRPGs that I've ever played. And I've played a lot of JRPGs. Pretty much if it exists and it's a JRPG, I've probably played it. And this one is one of the best. So without revealing too much of the game, I'll just give you guys a short synopsis. So in this world, they've just undergone a technological revolution where they've invented this mechanical gadget called an orbment. So the orbments provide power, and they have a plethora of other uses where they're able to innovate and change everyday life in a massive way. So basically think of it as electricity was just discovered and the technological boom that followed it. But with orbments, you could engineer them for weapons development. So using these orbments, the main characters, which are adopted siblings, become what are called bracers. They're combat specialists meet detectives, and they travel around the kingdom helping people with various problems. So aside from having a great story, these lovable characters, and a fantastic soundtrack, the game has this vividly simplistic yet complex combat system. So you collect all these different gems as you adventure around, and you fit them kind of like materia from Final Fantasy, and you fit them into your combat armor. And depending on the combination of colors that you have, you get to use different spells and abilities. So needless to say, there's like a huge amount of customization that you can do in the game as far as what spells and stats that your team has. And like I honestly could talk for hours about this game and like and the whole series. Like I can't say like enough about how great it is. And I've never seen it listed anywhere. Like I just randomly picked it up off Steam one day because again, I love JRPGs. One of the best games I've ever played, hands down.
Nice.
Yeah, never played it. Might definitely want to check that out though.
Connor's gonna finish this up.
So, for my last one, I know neither of y'all have played it. Obviously, again, horror fanatic, love it so much. Slender Man, the 8 pages.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Oh man, this game terrified me, and like I feel like it got no recognition because if you don't really know who Slender Man is, which I mean maybe everybody knows who he is, but the fact that there's a game made out of it, the game was so much fun. So you were in the woods, Slender Man, which is like a 10-foot tall dude with long limbs that just like, yo, he's gonna come kidnap you. He's just out here. Your goal is to run around these woods lost, and you have to find these 8 pages that are stapled to trees, right? But you don't have a weapon. Your only way to get away from Slender Man is if he appears in your vision, is to run away. You just gotta run. And if you look at him for too long, you die. It's terrible. And as you collect pages, Slender Man gets more and more aggressive. And so you're ending up like trying to like not look at him, but you have to run in a certain. It's craziness. And I feel like for a horror game, nobody really ever played it.
I'm gonna be honest. Like, I've played it.
Have you?
Yeah, I played it too.
Yeah.
So
I played it for 5 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, I played it for like less than that probably. But I definitely watched like YouTube video compilations of people like being scared by Slender Man because I think it's hilarious.
Oh, he's so terrifying.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, if you're into that genre, that's a great game because I think that the key to horror games is making it to where the player is powerless to stop what's going to happen. Like if you have the ability to stop the baddie from hurting you, what are you scared of then? So
exactly.
you got to be able to, you have to be powerless. So I think that Slender Man kind of nailed it for that genre.
Exactly, and I feel like that's what shares, like exactly how you said, and that's what like the game Outlast, those kinds of games share that similarity, and that's what really made them, to me, great horror games. Is that your only option is to run. You just got to dip.
Yep, hide and run.
Runner simulator.
All right, so to wrap up our list, I'm going to go over them one more time. So Connor, his list is Vampire, No Man's Sky, Until Dawn, and Slender Man. I've got Uncharted Waters New Horizons, Crosscode, Baseball Stars, The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, and Jesse with Earthbound, Conquer's Bad Fur Day, Parasite Eve, and Mad Games Tycoon. If anyone that is listening has a game that we missed and that you love and that we should love too, please be sure to email us. Make sure you reach out to us on social media, and we really want to hear from you guys. So we did it, boys.
We did
another episode in the books.
5 in the books.
5 in the books. So
there's so many on my list, by the way. I'm so mad.
Yeah, I have a few more on my list too, but we'll save them for another time. So, but before we wrap up, I want to chat about next week quickly. So next week we're going to be deviating from our normal format and bringing you a very special edition of the show.
I had an idea.
Ooh.
Yeah, Jesse had an idea. It's going to be a riveting lightning round edition where we'll each pick a few games that we're incredibly familiar with, and then the other two will rapid fire dumb questions, and we have to answer them. We have to answer them off the cuff. So it should be interesting. Should be a riot, and definitely something you don't want to miss.
That'll be fun. I like that idea.
It's gonna be great. I'm really excited about it. So, but before we end, what are you guys playing this week? You guys playing anything interesting?
So I have been playing through because last week I think somebody touched on it when we talked about Comstock, but I've been playing BioShock Infinite back through, and it is just so amazing. Such a great game.
I watched the speed run of that a few times. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. What are you playing, Jess?
Not Cyberpunk, that's for sure. Still waiting for PS5 to become available for me to purchase. So probably just more of the mobile game I play, Summoner's War. Probably some more Pokemon, and we'll see what. Definitely gonna be playing sit on couch watch Mandalorian game.
Oh, that's a good game too.
Yeah,
that is a good game. Top tier.
So I'll definitely be continuing my my YouTube run that I'm doing of the insane difficulty mod for Final Fantasy Tactics. It's really hard. Like I'm excited to play it, but it is definitely hard.
That sounds hard.
Yeah, all the guys, they have new abilities and all the classes have changed, so nothing that I remember makes sense, and like I have to like basically learn the game from scratch, and it's much harder.
That makes it
But
fun
anyway,
though.
yeah, it is. It's so much fun. Like I'm super glad to be playing it again. I played it like I got like halfway through it a couple months back, but then I kind of put it down. But I'm gonna finish it this. So just a final reminder for the listeners, like feel free to contact us on any of our social media or email. And that email one more time for you guys is I might need this later, agp@gmail.com. So for Jesse and Connor, my name's Joe, and we'll see you all next week.
Have a good night. Have a good night, guys.
Keep gaming, everybody.